Their biggest failing over and over again is talking about the things that we got. We got 14 clients at X cost per client, and like you're talking about all the things that you've won. The magic is to get that person to focus and drill down. What are the things that we lost? I want that person to be in call rail and be like, this is a 12-minute phone call. What happened to Mary? Why isn't she spending money with this law firm right now? What happened?
Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm excited for this conversation today, specifically because my guest is somebody who doesn't mind to say the way that it is. Like, there's almost like no filter when I'm conversing with him. And I really love that. Not because, it can come off as crass and uncaring, but I don't think that that's really what's happening behind the scenes. But I think it's important when we're trying to make business decisions that we get the information without the fluff. Like, let's remove all of the rosy pictures and let's talk about the reality of the situation. And then that's what I want to do today in this conversation. We've had plenty of marketers here on the podcast, plenty of conversations around marketing on the podcast. But my guest today is going to help us to really figure out what's going on in marketing today for law firms and how does this affect you? How should you be thinking about marketing when it comes to your firm? And there's so much out there and there's so much to think about and to do. How do we silo what the law firm needs to know, and how do we, make good decisions in this whole process? And that's really the conversation that I want to attack today with my friend Conrad Saam. So Conrad is the founder of Mockingbird. After leading marketing efforts for Avo, he founded Mockingbird, an online marketing agency focused exclusively on legal, called the Gary V of legal. I don't know who calls you that. Conrad is the author of Own the Map, published
Branding.
by the American Bar Association and the Fine Law Jailbreak Guide. So co-host of Lunch Hour Legal Marketing with another friend of mine, Geet Sakalakis, and Google Small Business Advisor, and held positions for various ABA's practice management marketing committees. There's a bunch more in this bio, but that's enough. Conrad, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to have me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I usually start with like, hey, can you introduce yourself? But I'm pretty sure most people in the legal space know who Conrad Saam is. So let's just jump right into the conversation.
Sure.
The thing that I'm grappling with my clients, and we work with clients both in a coaching program for solos trying to grow beyond themselves. So they're in the 750K revenue to 2 million range. And then we do fractional CFO work, which is your 3 million to 25 million revenue firm. And what's interesting is that, the smaller clients, they're just trying to figure out like, I have a minimal budget. What should I spend it on? I help them to expand their thinking about how much they should be thinking about spending. But ultimately, they have to make a decision about where to spend that money. The larger clients, they're spending the money, but I don't think that they're doing it in a well thought out or wise manner. They don't have a good way of tracking it. Even when they have a marketing person on staff, often that marketing person is either a glorified vendor management person or they come from a world and have an agenda. So like I have one client where the marketing person comes from the TV world. So he wants to stuff the whole budget into TV commercials.
Of course.
Where I have another client where, that person was trying to just, spend money, like they won in SEO. So trying to spend money in anything that might be relative to SEO and ignore the rest. Well, what's happening is the market is changing and the landscape is changing. Like, for example, SEO was a really good investment for a long time, but now when you go do a Google search and, the first result, the number one result on the page shows up 3/4 of the way down the page.
Mm-hmm.
So where is, how should I don't even know where to start this conversation, but let's just ask this question. How should a business owner, a law firm owner today approach the marketing discussion? What I can define with my clients is how much should I spend and what do I want to get for that? So they know how many leads they want to get and they know how much they're willing to spend on it. From there, How do you navigate where to put that budget?
Well, I think you need to start out with understanding where we want to go. Are we trying to add $1 million in revenue? Are we trying to win Houston in the next 3 years? Like, where are we trying to go? Which is kind of self-evident, but like this whole EOS thing about, annual business planning and 10-year goals and 3 year, like this, you need to have an idea of where you want to go. And the next thing that I do not understand for the life of me why this seems to be missed by all of the marketing people, especially those that are you talked about like the TV person thinking that everything should go on television. Different marketing channels return at a different rate, right? And so some are more really cost effective. I'll use a clear and obvious example of that is referral business, right? You do great work, you get referred business, and that's really cheap. Now, if it's from a lawyer, it's 30% of the cost per client. So like there's nuances to that. But I'm talking about genuine referral business. Um, it's great. And you should do as much of that as you can. But you're never going to grow your business if that's what you are relying on. Probably, right? And then
Or
you and
you're
then
never
you
going to grow beyond a certain point. Like I've definitely met
yeah,
business owners with multiple millions of revenue, all built on
yeah,
referrals. So I think it's, like there is a certain amount of path you can travel with
sure.
that, but at some
It's
point you
great.
need to add more to that.
Well, you only need to add more if you want to get more, right? And I think
Correct.
what you have to realize is you're moving up the cost per client ladder as you get more aggressive with your marketing. You want to grow by 10% next year, you can have a cost per client of 10% of the value of the client across all of your marketing. You want to grow by 30% next year, that number needs to be 25 or 30%. Like I'm pulling these numbers somewhat out of the air depending on who you are and where you are and what you do. But like you need to lean into marketing channels that are increasingly less cost effective as you want more volume, right? And the one of the dangers that we have, you pointed this out in the intro, is the person who thinks who made it in SEO, right? Either the agency or the law firm, and they think that's the way to go, or they made it in local, or they've nailed the pay-per-click algorithms, or 2 years ago they were killing it in LSAs, and boy, if we could just get up those LSAs coming back. It's simplistic, right? And what you really need to understand is, given where I want to go and my assets and liabilities and the competitive landscape, what are the right levers to pull, and what is my cost per client I'm willing to swallow, right? Um, and that's missing. It's completely missing in the market because most people think that what they do is the right marketing channel. Or on the legal side, most of you are looking for the really cost effective things, right? And those have disappeared by and large. The volume's not there.
So what's interesting is from the business perspective, and this is something that is hard to understand until you see it happen in reality. But there's a certain amount of fixed costs and a certain amount of variable costs in producing the work. So
Yeah.
I've got an attorney, I've got a legal assistant, I've got a paralegal, I've got a back office staff, I've got rent. That stuff gets covered. And then once that's covered, every dollar I bring in after that is profit.
Right.
So when if we manage this continuum of increasing clients and increasing the spend of the cost of getting them, if we manage that continuum to be matched up with that, clearing that overhead hurdle, and
Right.
now we're above that, then we can afford to spend 30% on marketing. The
Right.
problem is where firms are going to spend money at all costs to bring in clients and they ignore the rest of the math. And that's when, I've got clients coming in, doing 7, 10, 12 million dollars in revenue with a profit margin of, 10% because
And is that
spending
margin
30% on
after the
marketing.
the ad spend?
What's
Because
that?
they're putting so much into marketing, right?
Marketing is one of the big pieces. The other big piece is personnel, actually. So a lot of people are paying their people in really strange ways that they picked up at a conference, they heard somewhere, they tried it themselves, they think it works, and they're giving away too big a piece of the pie to their staff, whether they're paying them on a percentage basis or whether they have inefficient staff. Those like when I come into work with clients, it's one of those two is usually the key to success. right? Like we figure out, restructure the way that we pay people and figure out how to get them to be more productive through a ton of like really well thought out performance based compensation. And then on the marketing side, paying attention to the marketing. So they're just throwing money at the problem and seeing what sticks. And even what sticks, they're judging it based on their total lead volume. I had one client, we came in within 90 days, they made more money in those first 90 days than they did the entire year before because we simply looked it further down the rungs of the ladder into the
Right.
actual campaigns and said, what are we doing here? You're spending, $40,000 a month on Google ads, but only one $6,000 campaign actually is paying
Right.
off.
Right. So you said lead volume. And I think you're right. A lot of law firms are like, if I only had more leads, boy oh boy, could I grow that much faster. One nuance to that, leads are a terrible way to evaluate your digital marketing. You really want to be looking at consultations. Leads can be and agencies are complicit in this. If someone clicks on a pay-per-click ad because they're the opposing counsel and they just need your phone number, we'll count that as a lead if we can, right? You should be talking about consultations and not leads. So that's kind of a bit of an aside for me because that person's not going to turn into a consultation attributed pay-per-click, right? And so you really want to be thinking about consultations. But the other thing that you hit on that's super relevant here is the efficiency, right? And how are we running these matters? And the reality is, if you want to be an aggressively growing firm, and I said this earlier, I set this up already, you are going to have to accept a higher cost per client because the volume, I'll take pay per click as an obvious example of this, but most of the volume is expensive to acquire, period. That means in order for you to make a profit on this, like this is very different than it was 10 years ago. In order for you to make a profit on that, you need to be amazingly efficient at A, running that matter, and B, generating as much revenue as you can out of that matter. So both of those things need to be true in order to accept those higher cost per client consultations that will turn into tomorrow's profit, right? Um, and and most firms don't think this way, right? Most firms really are struggling because the harder you press on the gas pedal, the better you have to be at running cases from an efficiency perspective, generating as much revenue out of those cases as quickly as you can as possible. Like how many people are thinking as about their time on desk as a key metric that they're managing? Probably, I don't know about your listeners, but like that is so important because that's your cash flow, right? And that's the cash flow that then can turn around and go right back into your business. And if that's not something that you're thinking about, you literally have a smaller marketing budget or a smaller profit at the end of the day. Either it's the same thing. That becomes a problem. That becomes an anchor on the growth of your business.
Yeah, you said something that would really reminded me of an experience I had when I was younger. So I don't know if you know this about me. You're a ski patrol person. I'm a paramedic. So, what back in my early days as an EMT, I was in the back of an ambulance, and I had a driver and a crew chief that were in the front seat. And these two
Okay.
guys was the one was Russian and one was American, two Jewish guys, and they were I mean, they were funny as hell, but they were also like wild. Is not a good depiction of what they are. They would drive down this main street of Spring Valley with cars parked on both sides and traffic going in both directions, and there's like literally no room to get through. And they
Yeah.
drive down 70, 80 miles an hour down this main drag on the way to a call. And they said the faster that we go, the thinner the ambulance gets. Was the way that they approached this challenge. And when you said like the harder you want to press, like the more it's going to force you into doing things efficiently, it kind of reminded me of that, of that experience, where you're kind of forced to do things at a faster pace because you're moving faster. But then if you try to slow down and catch your breath, it all falls apart. I think one of the things that one of the things that I found is even if certain ways of attracting clients are going to be more expensive, they also might be giving you clients faster than other approaches. So like TV ads, for example, they're
Yeah.
not an expensive cost per acquisition. Actually, when we look at the mathematics of it, and you look at any large PI firm, for example, that's running these ads, um, the economics of what they're driving from it make a lot of sense. But when it's just a large budget you have to commit to. But if you're trying to solve a problem tomorrow, TV ads are not going to bring that in.
Right.
They need to run for months before people start to remember your name when that thing happens, and they're going to go and,
Sure.
and get in touch with you. Um, it's not direct response marketing. So if you need cases now, you have to go to Google. You have to go to that bottom of of funnel, somebody who's looking for that solution right now, which is going to be the most expensive place to play because that's the easiest place to get clients. Um, Go ahead.
100%. And the digital marketing world has exacerbated this problem. And I was part of this. So I'm not standing on any high horse here. We used to talk about like you should only do things that you can track, right? And that is a direct response vehicle. And SEO, some of SEO can be direct response, right? And it used to be more direct response than it currently is. Pay per click is obviously direct response. LSAs are obviously direct response. Um, when it's non-branded LSAs, that's a whole different beast to tackle. And from because it's direct response, I was talking about cost per client. You can actually get finite and granular and individual about the cost per client. This client cost me $75 to acquire, or $750 to acquire, or $7,500 to acquire. You can nail that down with a good direct response campaign. And you should, right? And then you can talk about like very basic MBA stuff by, if you go all the way down to revenue, you can even calculate return on investment for your ad spend, blah, blah, blah. ROAS, whatever you want to do, that's doable. But it's very expensive. Everyone is playing in that game. And we, the agencies who have been so focused on metrics and tying these things together with clicks and call rail and Google Analytics and your website and call tracking numbers, and we've encouraged it, right? Which is great. The rest of the stuff you can't. Like I talk about dark social, but TV advertising is the same. It's omni-channel marketing where you're not touching one person one time and they're buying from you. You are touching them across multiple channels, Instagram, TV, radio, OTT, the fact that you coach the kids' little league team, whatever it might be, you're touching them in sounds creepy, and you're touching them in lots of different channels with lots
Yes.
of different channels. And you can't go through this silly exercise of trying to come up with some formula to say, what are all the different ways I touched Bill before he called us? Because you won't get them correct. And the weighting of them is stupid. So you end up with this, we call it the BFA, the big average, where you look at all of the non-direct response and non-referral business that you have generated and all of the marketing dollars that you've spent on non-direct response efforts and divide. And that's your number, and it's completely unscientific, and it does not get granular with a person, but that's how it actually works, right? And so you're right. There is amazing. We really, from a chief marketing officer perspective, you have to separate direct response analysis at the individual level and the everything else analysis at the whole level. And you have to think it that way. And most of you guys don't think about it this way.
Right. I mean, for me, I'm approaching it from the other side of it, right? Like I'm approaching it from the P&L. And I'm saying,
Okay.
what percentage of your revenue are you spending on marketing? So I'm looking at marketing as just one bucket, and you should, this is healthy, this is not, right?
Right.
And there isn't a rule across the board. People want to know, okay, what is that
Yep,
percentage?
that's right.
It really depends on the practice area. For example, personal injury, and this is interesting. Personal injury can afford to spend significantly more in marketing than family law attorneys. And it's very simple because a single pre-litigation personal injury attorney can handle somewhere between 160 and 200 simultaneous cases, which means that they could produce 2 to 3 million in revenue for the firm.
Right.
So our cost to deliver that, even if we're giving nice bonuses to that attorney and to the support staff, our cost to deliver that is a fraction of what it costs to deliver legal services to somebody who's doing family law or criminal defense. And therefore, a higher percentage of that revenue needs to go to the delivery of the legal service, and therefore cannot go to the marketing. So, the percentage that we can spend on marketing and PI, might be in the 15 to 25% bucket, but where family law needs to be in the 10%.
Right.
So that, that's one place that we like to start, but it's just a starting point. And the other thing that's interesting is that um, one of the things that I think is important for business owners to understand is that it's not the chicken or the egg. It's not the chicken coming first, right? So you can't wait for that to have the revenue in order to spend the money on marketing. You have to actually spend the money on marketing first to generate the revenue you want. So I'll sit with business owners and they'll be like, okay, I want to do 10% of my budget on marketing. And I'll say, okay, but your goal is to get to 6 million this year and you had 4 million last year. So we're not talking about 400,000, we're talking about
Right.
600,000.
Right.
And you need to be at that higher spend if you want to generate the 6 million in revenue that you're trying to create.
We had this employment lawyer in Houston or Dallas. I think he was in Houston. It was
A
one of the two.
Texan.
He was a Texan. He was a very classic Texan. He wanted to be the largest employment law firm in Texas. And he was spending $6,000 a month on average on marketing. And he was always unhappy. And he's no longer a client because it just doesn't work, right? Like
Right.
it's the matching of the objectives and then it gets difficult, right? Like again, how much of your profit, how much of today's profit are you willing to put into growing tomorrow, right? And coming back to the earlier part of the conversation, the less efficiently you run your firm, the less profit you have, the slower you're going to grow. You need to I mean, this has really changed in the last 10 years. You need to run an efficient ship. There needs to be a lot of profit left over, and you need to pour lots of that back in if you want to grow. And if you can pull that off, you're gonna do great, right? Especially if you're not in PI, you're gonna do great. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
interesting because you talked about the efficiency of delivery of legal services. I did a talk at the Law Firm Growth Summit, and the name of the talk was "You Don't Need More Leads." And the purpose of that talk was to demonstrate that there's so much more to the sales cycle
yeah,
than the actual lead coming in the door. And there's so many places where firms are failing and losing those leads along the way. And if they fix those leaky buckets, that same marketing budget, that same whatever it was, let's say it's $10,000 a month that was producing $1 million or 1.5 million in revenue, could produce three if you simply solved all the leaks along the way and doubled the amount of clients from the same exact number of leads coming in.
and I think the law firm owner that we've got this kind of, there's the EOS thing with the integrator. There's people hiring COOs. There's the operations kind of focused people. Their biggest failing over and over again is talking about the things that we got. We got 14 clients at X cost per client. And like you're talking about all the things that you won. The magic is to get that person to focus and drill down. What are the things that we lost? I want that person to be in call rail and be like, this is a 12-minute phone call. What happened to Mary? Why isn't she spending money with this law firm right now? What happened? And the more you focus on, you said the leaks in the funnel, it's the same thing, right? The more you focus on where those opportunities are blown, and I mean really detailed, listening to the phone calls. Did we follow up? Who followed up? When did they follow up? What did they follow up with? Did we follow up again? Like you will start to win without spending any more money with Google or Conrad, right? And that's the efficiency, but that you have to focus on the stuff that you're losing, not talk about the stuff that you're winning, right? And that's magical.
It's really true. And I had this conversation with one of our fractional CFO clients at the beginning of the year. We were in the planning stages and they said, we want to go, they wanted to increase their revenue by 1.5 million.
Okay.
And I did an exercise with them and I showed them that we could reach that additional revenue goal by simply increasing their sales close rate on leads by 1% a quarter for the
Yep.
year. So
Yep.
every quarter, increase it by one more percentage point than the previous quarter. So to
Yep.
go from 21% to 22, 22 to 23, 23 to 24 in 4 quarters, that alone would create that 1.5 million of revenue they wanted to increase.
100%.
And it's crazy because we think it's like this big behemoth that we need to do. Now, obviously, the smaller firms listening to this, like if you're not having thousands of leads come in, it's not the same. It's not the same magic, especially if you're the one doing the sales, you're the one doing the follow up. Like you probably have less leaky buckets, but even then, there's opportunity.
Yeah.
automating drip campaigns, making, increasing show up rates. How many leads do you have come in? They book a call or consult or whatever, and they don't show up. We're
Right.
having this in our business right now. We're running a Facebook campaign, and it's costing us an arm and a leg to get people in the door. And then, I mean, we've finally figured out the right messaging to get people to book a call, and then we've got a show up rate of like 13%. And these are attorneys who have a problem they need solved, and and they're not
Right.
showing up to the call. So what are you doing for that?
So you need to think through that, how do I make 13, 14% and 15% and 16%? I'll give you the one I've used this is not a new concept for me, but it's still unfortunately a salient point. Those of you listening, what is your phone call answer rate? What is your phone call answer rate? You don't know. You have no idea, probably. And if you know what your phone call answer rate is, it will annoy you and you will work to improve it. If you don't know what it is, you probably think it's really good. For those of you who've in your head have answered it's 100% because they use a third party answering service, that tells me you have never, ever, ever listened to inbound calls going to your third party answering service because they do not answer the phone 100% of the time. They just don't. So know what your phone call answer rate. I can tell you for us, our clients on average answer the phone 93 to 94% of the time. We have some that are answer the phone 85% of the time. And so if I can just get that 85% of the time up to 90, it's like increasing their revenue by 5% by doing
Yep,
nothing.
you made
Doing
magic.
nothing. Just answer the bloody phone.
It's true. And I refer back to that old Clio Legal Trends report back in 2019, 2020, when they surveyed 2,000 law firms. And the answering services beat this one to death, where, 2,000 law firms, they went and acted like they were shopping for
Yeah.
business. And it was something like 67% of them either didn't answer the phone or didn't return a voicemail message that was left, which I mean, one way to look at it is like, okay, if you answer the phone, you're in the top 1/3 of all law firms, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but the other thing is I just met with one of my clients, and we went through. I asked them. I said, "Tell me what happens when the phone rings," and we created a flow chart of the what happens. What the path that somebody has to take to become a client. And it was insane how many different steps that one person needed to take in this journey, right? Oh, it rings here. And if it doesn't get answered after 3 rings, then it rings here. And if it doesn't get answered after 3 rings, then it rings here. Then it goes to voicemail, and then somebody calls them back and sets up an intake appointment. And then the intake person, and when I looked at it, I said, well, what if the intake person answers the phone? And then if it's not a sales lead,
Right.
transfers it to the receptionist. Like, what if we cut out 17 steps for your prospect?
I am a big believer that especially with all the automation and the functionality of CRM, what it can do. There's this great software development edict that says just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And
Yeah.
some people tend to overcomplicate what they have, and they break. It doesn't need to be that complicated. It's not as fast, and so you need to be thinking through what are the things that are going to make this like it to me the efficiency and simplicity. There's another old edict. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. Like, what do you have to do to work on things to make things simpler for yourselves and your prospective clients, right? And that will turn into faster, right? And the faster you make a decision on something, the more likely you are to make a decision in the affirmative, right? And that is the whole magic of intake and simplicity.
Yeah. Let's come full circle. Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, we've had a conversation that's pretty much been all over the map around efficiency
Yeah.
of law firm, efficiency of intake, different types of marketing, different costs, different, looking at it as a percentage of revenue. There's this other piece of the puzzle, which is owners are trying to solve the marketing problem themselves. And
Okay.
you and I in the green room before we started talking about CMO. There's a lot of firm owners who are trying to do this themselves, and they are the vendor management. And that it simply comes down to picking the right vendors. But even then, like, you don't know what you don't know. Like right now, YouTube is probably one of the best places to get direct response leads that are not people actively searching on Google. Yet nobody's doing it. Nobody's looking for it. I mean, I just asked you, and you said that Mockingbird is, but generally, law firms are not investing in YouTube, and we don't have a ton of YouTube agencies out there. Yet, it's such a great place to get leads. But I think it requires you need somebody with the breadth of knowledge to understand all the different possibilities and to analyze the which is the best place for us to put our money, at least to test
Yeah.
something and see if it's going to work. Hence, in comes the role of CMO, right? Or head of
Okay.
marketing or whatever you want to call them. Put somebody in your firm that is a marketing person that is going to drive the marketing conversation and agenda based on your firm's goals and the budget that you want to get them in uh, to achieve that success. And they become the vendor manager when necessary to involve a vendor. What are your thoughts on that whole piece of the puzzle? And what are you finding with your clients? Are they do they have a marketing person on staff? Is that something that you're doing as an agency for them? And what are your thoughts about what firm owners should be thinking about as far as should I have somebody in this role, and when is the right time?
So I think this goes back to how aggressively you want to grow. And the CMO it's a very important role, a very, very important role. Um, and I think it is often filled with the wrong person. It's typically filled with one of two people. It is either a consultant, coach, fractional, right? Who's basically a salesperson filtering business to their friends and getting a kickback on that with or without disclosure. That is a common, but that person has never been, they're a salesperson. They've never been a chief marketing officer. The other non-chief marketing officer that gets elevated into the chief marketing officer role is the person who it's typically a younger person who becomes a director of marketing. They got pushed into like understanding the internet because they used to answer the phones and they now understand social media and they've been tactically doing things. This person is really important to tactically execute, especially if you're doing dark social campaigns, community engagement campaigns. That's a great role. And we have tons of clients who have this role, but it's someone who's typically building up within a firm. I have a very strong bias that if you are really committed to aggressive growth, neither of those people should fill that strategic, real CMO role. You need to pull in someone who's been a CMO, probably somewhere else, maybe probably not in legal, but somewhere else, because that person really understands the business that you're trying to create. They understand all of the different channels. They're probably tactically inept at the individual channels, but they see how they all work together. They understand that some things are direct response and some things are brand development. They understand that handing out water bottles at a 5K race isn't going to turn into a client tomorrow, but like over time, when you do that over and over and over again, that's why Coca-Cola continues to advertise, even though I'm never going to buy anything when I buy a soda other than Coke. They're continuing to do that. Someone who has that experience, who is coming probably from out of the legal industry, if you are a really aggressively growing firm, is the right person. It's not a salesperson. It's not someone who's been promoted beyond his experience just because that's what they've done. So I love bringing people up. I love elevating people. I love developing people. But you guys know this because it would be like me trying to do my legal stuff on my own, right? Which would be asinine. And you guys all know that you need to bring in the expert, right? You need to bring in the expert operations person. You need to bring in the expert HR person. I've recently done that. She's an absolute rock star, right? And I never knew what I didn't know until I brought someone in who had been doing this. So my and if you are not on that, like I'm trying to take over Illinois mindset, yeah, bring your person in, tactically grow them up, but understand that you're going to be picking up a lot of the strategic side of this that they just don't have the experience to do. And you're not going to do a good job of it because you're a lawyer. And no offense to you, but like you should be focused on being a CEO. If you're not focused on being a lawyer, focus on being a CEO. And the marketing component is a slice of that pie.
Yeah, 100%. I love that way to look at it and that share. What do you think is the right size of business where and this is probably the wrong question because you're going to say, well, it's where do you want to go? So what is the right size or next step of business that somebody should be at where it's like, hey, you should probably spend 100,000 or something a little bit more than that and bring in a proper CMO.
So this is what I'll answer your question in a couple of ways. Number one, you're looking at 25+% growth per year. Okay. Like I am really trying to just grow. And the bigger you get, the more difficult that just mathematically becomes. But you're really trying to build business. You're moving into cities, right? Like that type of growth mindset. And the second part of this is you need to hire that person before you need to hire that person, right? Have her set things up before you could function without her for the next 2 years. But if you bring her on now, the next 2 years are going to be smooth sailing, and then you're really going to build opportunity, right? I think you need to, it's like hiring a doctor or like you need them before you need them, right? It's like hiring a lawyer. There we go. You need to hire the lawyer, get the advice early on before you're in a mess, right? Because you will most likely operate tactically yourself into a complete mess.
Yeah, I love that, and that's a great way to look at it. And it's, in my opening talk at the Law Firm Growth Summit, I talked about this concept, which is actually a book now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, speaking for Dan Sullivan. 10x is easier than 2x. And when
100%.
when you start thinking about these monumental steps of growth, that is probably when you want to engage that CMO. I understand, but we're out of time, so we can keep going on and on about this. But
Listen, I mean this. If you want to have me back, we can do another one. Like super happy to. I just apologize. We've got our monthly client meeting right
that's
now.
okay. That's okay. I'm going to let you go.
All
Real
right.
quick, how could people get in touch with you, learn more about you, and we'll close it out.
Yeah, the upside is I have a really easy SEO name. It's Conrad and the last name is Saam. And if you can't find me, I am not doing my job.
Awesome, Conrad. Thank you for being here. Love the
Thanks so
conversation.
much.
All right, folks, there you have it. Conrad Saam from Mockingbird. And if you want more conversations just like this, you want to join us at profitwithlaw.com. Any of the podcast audio directories you can find us on. Hit the subscribe button so you get notified when we go live with a new episode, which happens every single Thursday. We also have quite a comprehensive YouTube channel. It includes our podcast episodes along with other content. If you're already watching this on that channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if not, head on over to profitwithlaw.com/YouTube so you can get some more information in growing your firm and increasing profitability. See you next week. Take care.